Welcome to Art Watch, and I'm your host, Thomas Higgins, and today we are by phone from Minneapolis, Minnesota with performance artist and superhero Katie Ka Vang. Katie will be performing her nonfiction performance piece, Hmong Bollywood, at Out North Contemporary Art House, April 25th, 26th, and 27th. Welcome, Katie.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, Thomas.
Yes, and thank you in advance for coming to Alaska.
I'm so excited to be there, and can't wait to see the community there.
Yes, community is a big part of Out North, as well as the organization that is helping bring you here. But first, let's start off with, for many of our listeners, who is the Hmong? And for, I'm sure everybody, including myself, what is Bollywood?
Well, those are two really big questions. So first, the Hmong people are a group of indigenous people from the southern region of China. And then when war happened, a group of ethnic groups, which is the Hmong, we decided to flee China. And so we found refuge in Laos. And there we were recruited by the U.S. CIA to be a part of their secret army to fight against communism. And from there, which is where my father was recruited to be a soldier. And after that war, we fled and sought refuge in Thailand, which is where a lot of my siblings were born. And so that's sort of the Hmong people, our history in a nutshell. I mean, it's obviously a lot more complex when you're talking about war and immigration and refugeeism. On the other side, Bollywood is the Indian or Hindi film cinema from the country of India, and it has a lot of different elements. It has elaborate sets. It really has a lot of melodrama. It has singing and dancing, and they're basically huge musicals in a movie.
You're presently in the middle of your Pangea World Theater run of Hmong Bollywood in Minneapolis. Is this the premiere of your work, and how is it going?
Yes, so this is the world premiere of Hmong Bollywood at Pangea World Theater. It's going great. We've had amazing houses. Last night there was a standing ovation, and it helps a lot when the audience is really responsive. So, you know, there's nothing like playing for a home crowd. And everything is going really well. I'm going through the run, and I'm realizing how physically demanding it really is. But I love it. It's invigorating, so.
You mentioned Minneapolis is your hometown.
Well, I actually claim the Twin Cities. The Twin Cities includes St. Paul and Minneapolis, and they're so closely together, and they're really big cities, and so that's why they call them the Twin Cities. So I've been here for over almost 15 years, and I'm actually not originally from here. I was actually born in California. I'm the first in my family, first and only in my family to be born in the U.S., and then I lived in Portland for a little bit, and then, again, we moved back to Merced, California, and then we moved to Colorado. And in my teens, I moved to Minnesota, and this is where I really found, I think, where I start to find a sense of self, built my identity, and also found community. And so I claim Minnesota, the Twin Cities, as my hometown.
Were there Hmong communities in all those places you went, outside of your family that you traveled there with?
Yes. Minnesota and California are actually home to the largest Hmong populations, but Minnesota's home to the largest Hmong population in one area. So here, I like to claim that I am from the Hmong capital, so it's kind of awkward when I go to different places, like to the East Coast or to a smaller town like Providence. You know, I find myself going through my childhood again, like back in Colorado, having to explain what I am and going through that immigration question again, you know, because in Minnesota, I've never had to explain myself because it is the Hmong metropolis here. You know, wherever you go, they're Hmong people. You go to the gas station and they own it. So being outside of Minnesota has really given me a different perspective on identity.
Well, you won't have to do that quite as much here in Anchorage. We do have a community of Hmong as well.
Oh, perfect.
So you're doing a piece called Hmong Bollywood. For some of our less enlightened listeners, what is a performance artist?
A performance artist is, it's defined in a lot of different ways, but it's basically any kind of performance that can sit under the umbrella of theater, but it's not necessarily done linearly, or it's not. It doesn't have to be narratively necessarily. And so the kind of performance art in this specific piece, it has what I call a lot of like broken fragments, text written sort of in the form of, a lot of people may be familiar with Sappho, who is a poet who kind of just wrote in different fragments. And sometimes, you know, for the piece that I'm in, there is dialogue, but there's also just broken prose, and then there's sometimes poetry, and there's spoken word, and then sometimes there's no text at all. And so it's sort of like all these different ideas and concepts living together in one piece.
Often performance artists use multimedia as well. Do you have any visual or musical incorporations into your piece as well?
Yes, there is a multimedia art. We have a production artist that we've been working with, and there's also, I mean, being a Bollywood show, you cannot have a show without singing and dancing and movement in general. So all that is in there. So that there's projection, there's music, amazing lighting design. So,
what kind of music do you use?
In the piece? Yeah, in the piece I play a couple of different Bollywood songs. So there are 2 dance numbers, and they're really like Bollywood dance numbers. And then there's another one that they call the Heartbeat, and these are all scores that were in different Bollywood movies that I love. And then at the end there is a song that has been remade. It's a Bollywood song, but it's been remade by a Hmong group, and it has all Hmong lyrics, and it has Hmong singers in it. And so that's sort of, I play that for the curtain call.
So Bollywood is all the glamour and glitz of the performance. Is this something unusual for the Hmong generally? You
know, when my family came to the States, you know, they were refugee immigrants. And so, you know, I grew up always, my mother, I always tell this story, well, I've been telling it more recently, but I have a lot of Hmong American writers who are in the industry, and they write a lot about growing up I wanted to be white, growing up I wanted to be Laura Ingalls Wilder, and I sort of like, I never wanted to be white. Like, I always knew, and I think my mother made it very intentional. She was like, we are different, this is what we are, and this is who you are. And so I grew up never wanting to be white. I always wanted to be somebody like the stars that I'd seen in the Bollywood movies. And I don't want to give too much away because then it'll tell too much about the show. But, you know, in the 80s, my sisters started watching Bollywood movies, I think as a form to find themselves in a place where they were already displaced, you know. And so how can you find home in a world where you're already the minority? And so I felt like Bollywood is a way for them to sort of handle that, because back then, you know, Bollywood, they didn't have subtitles. So I was just having a conversation with my older sister, and she was like, no, back then there were no subtitles, but still we were able to watch it and understand the story that was going on. And, you know, and I think there were the elements that sophisticated people claim to be not into, which is like the super overreacting and like the melodrama. I think that helped. That helped my sisters who were immigrants to grasp onto something that could be theirs. Historically, Hmong people, we have never had a film industry of our own. So, I mean, not up until maybe, I wouldn't say the late 80s, that some Hmong production houses started to maybe dub films. And then I think, I mean, I'm not completely sure, but I would say early 90s is when they started to make music videos and Hmong movies. Even till then, they were dubbing Bollywood films and Chinese films and Thai films in Hmong. Even to this day, my mother watches Thai dramas dubbed in Hmong.
You were listening to Art Watch on KONR 106.1 LPFM, and we are here with performance artist and superhero Katie Ka Vang. Katie will be presenting her nonfiction performance piece, Hmong Bollywood, at Out North Contemporary Art House, April 25th, 26th, and 27th, Thursday through Saturday at 8 p.m. Ticket information at www.outnorth.org or by calling 279-8099. I mentioned this in the opening statement as well, but we haven't touched on that, so let's get to the superhero part.
I think I talked about that in maybe some interview that I had done. It might have been with NPR. But last year I was diagnosed with stage 4 lymphoma cancer, and over 70% of my body was covered in tumors. And, I wasn't sure what my life was going to look like in the summertime. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to take it day by day. And I feel like a little bit of this kind of got into my show, Hmong Bollywood. People were asking, has this changed your life? Has this, is it in the show? And I said, yes, it's in the show. Literally, there's maybe a content, a piece of writing that's in it. But I think overall, the process in putting this piece up, the way that I've handled certain things, it may not be visible, but going through that has really shaped me as a person, which obviously has shaped the way that this piece has come to formation and has finished. And so I feel like I'm a part of this secret superhero group where we know certain things just because we've gone through a certain experience. And, it kind of feels superhero-ish. I mean, going through cancer, stage 4, and coming out at the end. I'd like to claim that I am a superhero.
What prompted you to become a performance artist?
Good question. I was actually working for a human rights organization back in 2004, 2005, and I was sort of sitting behind the desk pushing papers sort of as a office administrator and sort of trying to convince myself that I was doing good work because it was for social justice. But in my heart, I felt like my best skills were being used, and I didn't quite know what those skills were yet either. And then there was a board member of this human rights organization, and he came in and he said, and I sat at the front office and he asked me, he said, I'm looking for women of color who are interested in performing. You don't necessarily have to have experience. Are you interested? And I said, yes. And so then he gave me his number, and then I called him, and he said, well, we're having sort of like a trial run. We don't believe in auditioning, but we're having sort of a rehearsal trial run if you want to come. And I said, yes. And I went, and we created this beautiful piece called Journey to Safety, which we did for International Women's Day around war and healing. And that person was Dipankar Mukherjee, who is the artistic director of Pangea World Theater. And ever since then, I've been performing. I've been doing work in their company as well, which is physical theater and ensemble work. And then from then on, I started to meet somebody else in a different theater company. And, it took a while because you fall into the different categories where a lot of the pieces and plays you're in are produced by Western mentality, right? So they have an idea of what Asians should be. And a lot of times, I'm just generalizing, but a lot of times they want to objectify you or they want to portray you in a way that they can digest, which and I like to make the argument that with the Hmong American experience, it's not something you can label, it's an experience. So it's not something concrete, and it shifts all the time. And I may be the performer who is being seen, but I'm merely just one voice out of 80,000 people, And so I think after I started to do that, after going through a lot of different messed up auditions and playing really messed up roles and not really understanding my own politics yet, or maybe building my own politics, I realized that there really weren't no Hmong roles out there that portrayed the experiences that I was closely related to. And I was like, there is no urban Hmong experience out there. And so then Meena Natarajan was like, well, why don't you start writing something? I'm like, okay. And then I started to get into the spoken word community, and I started to write spoken word, sort of slam-style poetry around the Hmong American experience and from the Hmong American perspective. And, that's kind of how I got into it. So starting to do spoken word and doing performance art through Pangea, and then I kind of meshed the two. And now I'm studying writing for performance and continuing on with shows like these.
You have also mentioned now how you connected with the Pangea World Theater in Minneapolis. How did you get hooked up with Out North to do this piece here?
Great question. I think that Nina Natarajan, who's the executive and literary director of Pangea, but who's also the director of Hmong Bollywood, she had a conversation with Scott Schofield, I believe, a couple of years back when the piece was just being workshopped. We had done maybe like a 50-minute version at their, one of their festivals, and we recorded it, and she had seen Scott at a conference, and she showed it to him, and he loved it. And I don't believe Scott is no longer there, but Donnell and Mina had reconnected, and Donnell was like, this is great. I'd love to continue to honor whatever agreement they had. And I think Donnell was also digging the piece, thankfully, and that's how that partnership formed.
Yes, what Katie speaks of is the National Performance Network, and they are an organization that are operating out of New Orleans, Louisiana these days. And their agenda is to help performance artists taking risk get their show out across the country for others to see, and to support organizations like Out North who take risk in showing these very different and edgy. We get a lot of different stuff through NPN. Most of it is socially and personal to the performance artists. It's not just about selling tickets. It's about community and communication and getting ideas across. And that's the idea behind the National Performance Network. And apparently we partnered with another organization, Art Spots Productions in New Orleans.
Yes. So after I come to Alaska, I will be taking the show to Art Spot as well. Looking forward to that and meeting all the different communities that live in your areas.
There's different outreach that our NPN performers do when they come to town. Sometimes it's working with kids at Nick Begage Grammar School, or going in and working with the kids at McLaughlin Youth Detention Center. It just all depends on the performance artist and what's available when they come.
Yeah, I think I'll actually be working with middle schoolers. I believe it's what Donnell said.
Is there anything that we may have missed that you want our listening audience to know about your piece here, Katie?
You know, it talks a lot also about different forms of escapism, you know, and ultimately that's also something that I'd like my audience members to think about and look at. What do we use as forms of escapism? I mean, for me in this piece, it might be Bollywood, but for somebody else, it might be religion, or it might be something else, you know. So I think that piece also encapsulates forms of addiction and forms of escapism. Yeah, and I'm just really excited to be coming up to Out North, and I hope people can come through, and really excited to be on the radio show. So thank you, Tom, for having me.
You're welcome. You have been listening to Art Watch, and we have been talking by phone from Minneapolis, Minnesota with performance artist and cancer survivor Katie Ka Vang. Thank you, Katie, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Katie will perform her nonfiction performance, Hmong Bollywood, at Out North Contemporary Art House, April 25th, 26th, and 27th. Get ticket information at www.outnorth.org or by calling 279-8099. Again, thank you for joining us, Katie. And this has been Art Watch, a production of Out North Art House Radio, KONR 106.1 LP.